Square roots and cube roots. All right, guys, so we're going to talk about what those terms mean and how to find square and cube roots. And obviously, this is 8th grade, Unit 1, Lesson 4, Video A. Okay, so a square root. A square root is the side length of a square. This is what I mean. We have this square here. It's a real nice square. The area is 4 centimeters squared. And so if you remember way back from, I don't know, 3rd or 4th grade, you learned that to find the area of a square, you multiply the sides together. And so before, you were probably given something like, okay, this is 2 centimeters over here, and it's a square. So what would the area be? And you go, oh, 2 times 2 is 4. Length times width is 4. But since the length and the width of a square are the same, it's just 2 times 2. So the area must be 4 square centimeters. Well, now we're trying to go the opposite way. And we're trying to ask you, without giving you this information, just given the area, what should the side length of this square be? Well, it becomes apparent then that it must be 2, because the only thing that can be multiplied by itself to give 4 is 2 or negative 2. And it wouldn't make sense to have a negative 2 side length on this square. So anyways, that's kind of what a square root is. It's just going the opposite direction than what maybe you're used to. Let me present it to you in a different way. So square roots can be both positive and negative, and here's why. The question that's asked when you see something like this is not the division symbol, this is the square root symbol. This asks the question, what times itself equals 4? And there are 2 answers to this. And I'm wondering if you can think of the answers before I say them. We know 2 times 2 is 4, but I said it just a second ago. What other number times itself is 4? Think about that for a minute. So 2 times 2 is 4, so we know that must be an answer. But what else? I hope you've thought of it. Negative 2. So that makes sense, because basically 2 times 2 is 4, and so is negative 2 times negative 2. Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So the square root of 4 is both positive and negative 2, and we can write that in a very specific way. We can write it like this. We say, okay, this equals plus or minus 2. So that's one way that we could write it. So square roots always have a positive and a negative answer. Let's talk about cube roots now. Then we're going to do a few together. A cube root is really, I'm going to take the same approach. A cube is a cube, and when we're talking about a square, it's a square. So we're not saying square and cube roots just because they have nice names, but because we're actually talking about a square, and we're actually talking about the geometric figure of a cube when we say a cube root. So in this particular case, you've probably been asked, okay, here's a perfect cube. One of the side lengths is 3 centimeters. What's the volume? Well, you know, to find the volume of something like this, you go length times width times height. But in a cube, all the length, the widths, and the heights are the same. It's all exactly the same. And so you just multiply 3 times 3 times 3. And 3 to the 3rd power, or 3 times 3 times 3 equals 27. And so you would go, oh, okay, if the side length is 3 centimeters, then the volume must be 27 cubic centimeters. But what a cube root does is it goes in the opposite way, just like a square root did, where we would say, you know what? We are going to challenge these kids now, these students, you guys, and say, we're not going to give you the side length. Let me get rid of all this. We're not going to give you the side lengths. We're just going to give you the volume, and we're going to ask you, what is the side length of this cube? And so here's another way to look at it. This asks the question, this cube root here, this asks the question, what times itself equals 27? So, before we looked at this, the square root of 4, I just want to point out a few differences. This part here is different than this part over here. You see that difference? A cube root, you know it's a cube root because there's a little 3 right there. A square root doesn't have any number there. But if we were to put a number there, it would be a 2. But we just, mathematicians are lazy, and we decided not to do it, not to write 2's there. So there's a difference. Also, the question's different. The question back here was what times itself equals 4 for a square root. But now we're working in 3 dimensions. Back here with the square is just 2 dimensions, a length and a width. But here we have length, width, and height, 3 dimensions. So we're going to ask ourselves, what times itself equals 27? Well, and I already gave away the answer, but 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. These two here equal 9, and then 9 times this 3 here gets us that 27. Okay? So it's the opposite. It's just working backwards. Okay, let's try a few together now. Find each square and cube root. And this is all you're going to have to do after this video is just find square and cube roots. That's all you're doing. Okay, what's the square root of 4? Or what times itself equals 4? And we've already discussed that, plus or minus 2. Similarly, I'm going to change my color here on my ink. What times itself equals 16? Well, we know 4 does. 4 times 4 is 16. But a negative 4 does as well. So I'm going to write plus or minus 4. And if you want to, you could write it like this. There's nothing wrong with writing the answer like 4 or negative 4. The only reason I abbreviate like this is because it saves room. And it's mathematically acceptable to do that. That's standard notation. Okay, but down here the question is different. It's not what times itself equals this number. It's what times itself times itself. So in these cube ones, they're not as intuitive to me. Like when I see a square root, I kind of know, and I think we all do, what times itself, because that's easier for our brain. But down here with the cube roots, they're not so easy. So sometimes we just have to guess and check. Let me try 2. Okay, 2 times 2 times 2. The question is, does that equal 27? Let's see. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. Okay, 2 did not work. But I know I have to multiply the same number 3 times to get that number underneath the roadway, or underneath the symbol. So let me try a different number. Let me try 3. And we know it's 3 because I've already done it. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So just 27. But notice, oh, sorry, not 27, 3. The answer here is 3 because 3 is the cube root of 27. But notice we can't say plus or minus 3 because a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3 does not equal 27. It equals negative 27. And that's not what we're asking for over here. So similarly with this one, we would guess and check. I'm going to guess 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so we know that. So these two fours make 16. Times that by 4, and inevitably we get 64. Aha! I keep wanting to write the wrong number here. Sorry. So our answer here must be 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So it's that simple. You just ask yourselves those questions. The difference between the square root is we're only asking what times itself. So we can have plus or minus, or positive or negative. And a cube root, you're asking what times itself times itself. Okay, good luck to you, and I know you're going to do great on this.